everybody. Today's lesson covers segments and their measures. The first part on your worksheet asks you to measure segments to the nearest millimeter. We'll need a ruler to do that, so we'll do that together in class. So let's go on to the next section. Okay, let's see here. We have points A, B, and C that are collinear. And remember, collinear means that they're on the same line. So just like this diagram we have here, A, B, and C, those points are on the same line. And point B is between A and C. So they're on the same line and B is between A and C. Then you can see that if you look at AB, so the measure from A to B, and then BC, the measure from point B to point C, if you add those together, then you will get the measure of A all the way to C. So in this picture, the yellow segment, that measure, plus the measure of the green, equals the measure of the purple. So for example, let's say that AB is 5 units long, and then the measure of BC is 11 units long. If you were asked to find then the measure of the purple, the measure from A all the way to C, you would add that together, the 5 plus the 11, and that would be 16 units long. Okay, let's try some examples. First, we have some true or false questions. Okay, so the first one, B is between A and C. Well, for B to be between A and C, two things have to be true. They first all have to be collinear. And then the second part, B has to be in between A and C. Well, right off the bat, if you see point B right here, is that collinear on the same line with A and C? Since it is not, right away we can say that this statement is false. Okay, part B. E is between A and B. Okay, well, here is E, and then here's B and A. Are they collinear? Yes, that part is true. But is E then in between A and B? It's not, so this one is also false. Okay, part C. E is between C and F. Okay, well, here's E again. Here's C and here's F. First of all, if E is going to be between C and F, they all have to be on the same line. Is that true? It is not. So right off the bat, you can say that this one is false. Part D. C is between B and D. Okay. So C is right here. B is here and D is here. Well, are all three of these points on the same line? Yes, that's true. And is C between B and D? Yes, that is also true. So this answer is true. Okay, let's keep going with some more examples. Okay, so part A. R is between Q and S. So they're telling us which point is between the other two, and we're going to use the diagram that's given to us to draw it. So if you put R, that point, in between Q and S. So Q then we can put over here, and S here. Okay, and then it says that the measure from Q to R is 12 units long. So this is 12. And then the measure from R to S is 9 units long. it helps to write the numbers on the diagram. And now you want to find how far is it from Q all the way to S. Well, you can do that by adding the 12 plus the 9, so the distance from Q to S is 21. Okay, next one. U is between T and V. So we want to put point U somewhere between point T and point V. Okay, and then let's label our diagram. So TU, the measure from T to U, is 4.5. The measure then from T to V, now that's the whole long segment, that is 10 units long. And they want us to find the measure of UV. How far is it from point U to point V? Well, in this case, we have the longest segment and one of the smaller segments. So to find UV, you are going to subtract the longest minus one of the smaller ones, and then you will get that from U to V is 5.5. Okay. Number 3, determine which point is between the other two. So now they're giving us the segment measures, but they're not giving us any picture. So if you draw a line, we need to figure out which one is going to go between the other two. The key part here would be to find the longest segment. So the longest one in this case is KT. That is 22 units long, which means then that from point K to point T, that's the longest segment in this picture. That's 22. Which then tells us that the only letter left to go in between would have to be then point C. And you can tell then that it fits, so KC, that's 14, and TC, that's 8. So the point that's between the other two is C. Okay, next one, which point is between the other two? Remember, the key is to find the longest segment. So the longest segment in this case is ZM. Well, if Z to M is the longest one, the other point then has to be in between. So then that means that the point that's between the other two is B. Okay, last one, little bonus question for us. Okay, let's start off. Suppose S is between R and T. So let's draw that picture right off the bat. Okay, we've got a line, and if S is going to be between R and T, they all have to be on the same line. Okay, and then let's label here. So R to S, that is 3x units long. S to T is 2x units long. And then R to T, the long segment, is 70 units long. So now we have to make ourselves an equation here. RS plus ST equals the longest segment, RT. The measure of RS, we said that was 3x, plus ST, which is 2x, equals RT, which is 70 units long. Combine like terms on the left side of this equation, so you get 5x equals 70, divide both sides by 5, x equals 14. Okay, so it says to solve for x, so we did that, x is 14, and then use that value of x to find the length of each segment. Okay, so we still need RS and ST. Well, RS equals 3x, but we know now that x is 14, so 3 times 14, which is 42 units long. And then ST equals 2x, which means 2 times 14, which means ST is 28 units long. Good job, guys.